Who were the Mayans really? The story they didn't tell you. Did you know that the Mayans calculated eclipses without telescopes, built pyramids aligned with the sun, and created calendars more accurate than ours? This ancient civilization flourished in the jungles of Mesoamerica thousands of years before the Europeans, and although many believe that they mysteriously disappeared, the reality is very different. The Maya were not only brilliant architects and astronomers, but also left a legacy that still lives on in millions of people today. This video will take you through its hidden cities, celestial secrets, and fascinating history. Get ready to find out who the Mayans were and why they never completely left. The Maya were not a single kingdom or a unified empire, but a constellation of independent city-states that shared language, culture, and religion. They inhabited a vast territory that encompassed southeastern Mexico, parts of what are now the states of Chiapas, Tabasco, Campeche, Yucatan, and Quintana Roo, northern Guatemala, Belize, and areas of western Honduras and El Salvador. This territory is known as the Maya area. The beginnings of their civilization date back to approximately 2000 BC in the so-called pre-classic period, although its peak occurred between 250 AD and 900 AD in the classic period. How many people lived in this civilization during that time? It is estimated that during its maximum splendor, the Mayan population may have reached between 8 and 10 million people. To get an idea of the size, the Roman Empire had already collapsed in that same period, and Constantinople, one of the most important cities in the world, had around 500,000 inhabitants. During their heyday, the Maya coexisted with other relevant cultures: the Teotihuacans in the central highlands of Mexico, the Zapotecs in Oaxaca, and later with the Toltecs and even the early Mexica, Aztecs, although the latter would emerge centuries after the collapse of the great Maya cities of the classic period. So the next time you hear about the Maya, don't imagine them as an isolated group in the jungle. They were a set of connected, brilliant giant cities ahead of their time. Mayan pyramids and cities. Sacred geography in stone. Imagine walking through the jungle among lianas and howler monkeys and suddenly seeing how the trees open to reveal a vast stone pyramid that touches the sky. That is what happened to the first European explorers who entered the Petan jungle in the 19th century. The Mayan ruins were surprising not only for their size but also for their sophistication, astronomical alignment, and artistic beauty. Maya cities were not simple groupings of huts, they were urban complexes with pyramidal temples, ceremonial plazas, astronomical observatories, sack bays, white roads, ball courts, and palaces for the nobility. Each city was a miniature cosmos, carefully planned according to its worldview. How many Mayan pyramids and cities are there? More than 4,400 Mayan archaeological sites have been identified so far. Some of the most important are Tikal, Guatemala, with temples more than 70 meters high and a population that reached 100,000 inhabitants. Chichen Itza, Yucatan, Mexico, where the iconic pyramid of Kukulkan is located, with 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. Palenque, Chiapas, Mexico, famous for its refined architecture and the tomb of King Pakal, buried in the Temple of the Inscriptions. Copan, Honduras, cultural center full of sculptures and altars with astronomical and dynastic inscriptions. Uxmal, Canacmul, Bonampak, the list goes on and on. These pyramids were not tombs like those in Egypt, although some were, but temples, observatories, and cosmic altars. They were built to honor the gods, to perform rituals and sacrifices, and mark critical astronomical events. Many are aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar phases, something we'll explore later. As for the Maya, building a city was replicating the order of the universe. The pyramid was the sacred mountain where the gods came down and humans ascended. Climbing to its summit was not only a physical act, but also a spiritual one. Their culture and lifestyle, beyond the temples. When we think of the Mayans, we usually imagine pyramids, glyphs, and ritual sacrifices, but we rarely think about something as simple and vital as: what did a Mayan eat for breakfast? What were their houses like? Was there music, a market, or fun? The answer is yes to everything and much more. Most Maya lived in rural communities, in houses built with mud walls or braided cane and palm rods. These dwellings were organized around family courtyards where they cooked, knitted, sewed, and shared daily life. Large cities like Tikal or Copan were home to the elite: nobles, priests, merchants, and specialized artisans. On the other hand, the peasantry lived more dispersed, although they were still linked to the big cities by taxes, rituals, and trade. As for food, corn was the center of their diet and mythology. They consumed it in the form of tamales, tortillas, atoles, and fermented drinks. They grew beans, squash, chili, avocado, tomato, cocoa, and corn. The latter was not only a ritual delicacy, but also a currency. Cocoa came to be worth more than gold in some contexts. They supplemented their diet with deer, poultry, fish, and in certain regions, domesticated dogs that were bred specifically to be food. Mayan life was also full of art. Stone sculptures, polychrome murals, and painted ceramics show scenes of mythology, war, dance, and daily life. In places such as Bonam Park, preserved scenes show rituals and even musicians playing instruments. The Maya used jade, shells, bone, and quetzal feathers to make jewelry that marked social status. They were not austere or simple. In fact, the average Maya was refined and very clean as they bathed every day. Yes, as you heard, they bathed every day. While medieval Europeans of the same period, especially after the 6th century, bathed occasionally, sometimes once a month or even a year, the Maya bathed regularly and valued hygiene for practical and spiritual reasons. They purified themselves using rivers, cenotes, and timescales, steam baths, especially before religious rituals. Although they did not have modern soap, they used plants, clays, and resins such as copal to clean and perfume themselves. Hygiene in Mayan culture was so important that even children were educated in these practices from an early age. Although they lived in the jungle, they did not smell bad since both men and women used perfumes made with flowers, resins such as copal, and natural oils for aesthetic and social purposes. They also had sports. The most famous was the ball game, a mixture of sport, ritual, and cosmic theater. It was played on special courts and, in specific contexts, could be linked to human sacrifices. But it was also a form of conflict resolution and a great social event of great importance. Regarding trade, the Maya were part of an extensive trade network that spanned Mesoamerica. From their cities, routes to the Gulf, the highlands, and Central America were available. The Maya exchanged jade, obsidian, cocoa, exotic feathers, cotton, salt, and pottery. In return, they received metals, dried fish, tools, and luxury goods. The Mayans didn't just build temples, they also wove, traded, prayed, played, danced, and ate together. Their civilization wasn't just one of pyramids and glyphs, it was a human culture deeply connected to the earth, human culture, and the cosmos. Mayan love. Although marriages in the nobility were arranged, falling in love played an essential role in the lower classes. So the man had to perform a ritual to make the woman, with whom he would spend the rest of his life, fall in love with him. Don't you find it curious that something as important as being able to choose the love of your life was reserved only for the lower classes? To win their lover's hand, men had to follow a whole courtship ritual. To do this, young men bathed and perfumed themselves with their best fragrances, adorned their bodies with colorful clothing, feathers, or jade, and presented themselves to the woman's family with gifts such as food, fabrics, or cocoa to show their interest and ability to provide. Before formalizing a union-specific ritual, it included purifications, consultations with fortune tellers, and offerings to the gods. It was common for the bridegroom-to-be to help the bride's family for a time, something similar to the bridal service that also existed in other Mesoamerican cultures. A good body scent, filled teeth, pierced ears, and an artificially flattened forehead were considered signs of beauty in men. On the woman's side, she also dressed up for the occasion. On the day of the ritual, the woman took a bath in a spring to purify herself. They were perfumed with aromatic resins, flower oils, and herbs. They also used red achiote powder to paint cheeks or lips, and in some cases, they chalked their faces with lime to highlight the features. Hair was very important. The Mayan feminine fashion was to wear hair long, clean, and combined with natural oils, decorated with colored ribbons, flowers, or even quetzal feathers. They wore earrings, necklaces, bracelets, and rings made of jade, shells, bone, gold, or copper. During the ritual, they were expected to be modest, serene, and respectful, but elegance and bearing were also valued. How they walked, talked, and sat reflected their education and preparation for adulthood. The Mayan courtship ritual was taken very seriously. After all, the consent of the bride's parents was at stake. Exceptional astronomers. In a world without telescopes, computers, or digital clocks, the Maya achieved something that continues to amaze scientists and historians today. They deciphered the rhythms of the sky with extraordinary precision. For them, the stars, planets, and sun were not just lights in the celestial vault, but guides to time, sacred symbols, and living forces that governed human destiny. The Mayans observed the sky with an almost obsessive constancy. They did so from the top of their temples or specially built structures, such as the famous Caracol at Chichen Itza, which functioned as an astronomical observatory. From there, they followed the movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and other stars visible to the naked eye. And with that data, they built one of antiquity's most complex and accurate calendrical systems. Unlike other cultures that had a single calendar, the Maya managed several at the same time. The hub was their solar calendar, which consisted of 365 days spread over 18 months of 20 days, plus a small month of 5 days considered unstable or unlucky. Then there was the Solkin, a 260-day ritual calendar based on combined cycles of numbers and sacred names. To record critical historical dates, they used the long count, a chronological line of thousands of years that began, according to the most widely accepted correlation, on August 11th, 3114 BC. This system allowed them to accurately predict equinoxes, solstices, and even solar and lunar eclipses without modern optical instruments. One of their most amazing achievements was tracking Venus, which they called Chak-Ek, the Great Star. The Dresden Codex, one of the few Mayan books to survive the conquest, contains a record of Venus's cycles, with an error of only 2 hours over 584 days. That equates to a margin of error of 0.01%. To achieve that, the Mayans needed mathematics. They used a vigesimal system based on the number 20, with dots, dashes, and shells to represent numbers. They invented zero independently centuries before Europeans adopted it. This concept allowed them to make complex astronomical calculations, structure their calendars, and carve exact dates in stone that can still be read today. But the most impressive thing is not only its accuracy, but also its vision of time. For the Maya, time was not linear, it was cylindrical. Everything had a beginning, a development, an end, and a rebirth. The calendars were not only used to count days, but also to understand the sacred order of the universe. So the next time you look at the sky and think of the Mayans, remember this: they didn't just observe the stars, they understood them, and they built whole cities to their rhythm. Did they disappear without a trace? If you've ever heard that the Mayans mysteriously disappeared, it's time to debunk that myth. No, the Mayans didn't vanish into thin air like an ancient magic trick. What happened is more complex, and above all, more human. To understand its decline, it must first be clarified that what collapsed was not the Mayan civilization in its entirety, but its classic urban and political structure. During their heyday, between 250 and 900 AD, the Maya built huge cities in the jungle, such as Tikal, Copan, or Calakmul. These cities were not only ceremonial centers, but also the axis of power, commerce, and religious life. But by the 9th century, many of these great cities began to decline sharply. The population shrank, the elites lost power, and temples were no longer built. What happened? The theory most widely accepted by archaeologists today points to a combination of environmental, political, and social factors. First, there is strong evidence of prolonged droughts in the Maya region, especially between 820 and 870 AD. These droughts, proven by sediment and stalactite analysis, would have caused severe agricultural crises, just as the population peaked. Less food, more conflict. At the same time, hieroglyphic records show signs of internal wars, broken alliances, and even burned cities. It is possible that competition among elites for scarce resources intensified conflicts, generating instability. Added to this is the wear and tear of the soil due to intensive agriculture and massive deforestation, which worsened ecological conditions. But here's the twist. Although many cities were abandoned, the Maya didn't disappear. Many communities survived in peripheral areas or migrated north of the Yucatan Peninsula, where new cities such as Uxmal, Mayapan, and Chichen Itza flourished during the so-called post-classic period, 900 to 1500 AD. Today, more than 6 million living Mayans speak languages such as Quichua, Yucatecan, Tzotzil, or Quechua. Modern Mayans live in Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras. The easiest way to recognize them is by their surnames in the Mayan language. Some of the most common are Chan, Pec, Canul, May, Canchi, Zul, and Put. They preserve traditions, textiles, worldviews, and in many cases, agricultural practices inherited from their ancestors. It is not an extinct civilization. It is a civilization transformed and adapted to modernity with cell phones, cars, computers, and the internet. So no, the Mayans did not vanish. They adapted, resisted the conquest, survived oblivion, and still walk among us. What did disappear was its classical world of monumental cities and deified kings, but their legacy is as alive as the stones they left.